The morning sun was just beginning to rise over the small town, casting a soft, golden light on the streets. Birds chirped in the distance, and the gentle rustling of leaves created a peaceful background to the awakening town. John woke early, as he always did, ready to run his errands before the heat of the day arrived. Today, he had one simple task in mind: to go to the market and buy meat for his family's dinner. It was a routine chore, something he had done countless times before, but for some reason, he felt a small sense of anticipation as he stepped out of his modest home. The cool morning air brushed against his face, carrying the faint smell of dew and earth. He walked down the narrow lane leading to the town market, his steps light but purposeful. The market was slowly coming to life. Vendors were arranging their stalls, displaying fresh vegetables, fruits, bread, and, of course, meat. The scent of cooked food from nearby food stalls mingled with the earthy smell of fresh produce. Some people were already haggling with the vendors, their voices rising and falling in the familiar rhythm of daily commerce. Children ran around, laughing and playing, while mothers kept a careful watch over them. The atmosphere was lively, yet comforting. A place where people came not just to buy things, but to see each other and share small moments of life. John moved through the narrow pathways between the stalls, carefully observing the prices and selecting the freshest items. He was a man who valued quality and practicality. When he reached the meat stall, he was greeted by the familiar smile of the vendor, a man who had known John for many years. "Good morning, John," the vendor called, his voice friendly and warm. "Here for your usual cut?" "Yes," John replied, smiling back. "The same as last time." The vendor nodded and began preparing the meat, cutting it with practiced precision. John watched for a moment, appreciating the skill and care that went into the work. He counted his money carefully, making sure he had enough to cover the cost. Everything seemed ordinary, familiar, and calm. But just as he was about to pay, his attention was drawn to a small commotion at the far edge of the market. A woman, dressed in simple clothes, was struggling to carry a basket filled with vegetables. She was an Apache widow, her features marked by lines of hardship and a quiet strength. Her hands trembled slightly under the weight of the basket, and her eyes constantly shifted, trying to avoid bumping into the bustling crowd. A small child clung to her skirt, holding on tightly as they tried to navigate the busy market lanes. The child's eyes were wide with curiosity, but also a hint of fear. As if the crowd and noise were overwhelming, John watched her for a few moments. She was not asking for help, nor was she crying out for attention. She moved with a quiet dignity, trying to manage her load as best she could. Yet, it was clear that she was struggling. People passed by without noticing or caring. Some glanced at her briefly and then looked away, too absorbed in their own errands. Others muttered under their breath but offered no help. John felt a small knot of unease in his stomach. He knew what it was like to struggle, to worry about getting enough for one's family, and he could see that this woman was in need. He tried to focus on his own task, reminding himself that he had come to buy meat. But his eyes kept drifting back to her. The vendor finished preparing his meat and placed it in a clean paper bag. John reached into his pocket and counted his money, feeling the weight of the coins in his hand. He was about to pay when he noticed the woman stopping in front of another vendor. She was trying to cover the cost of her vegetables but came up short. The vendor shook his head politely, refusing her request. The child tugged at her skirt, and she bent down to comfort him, whispering words John could not hear. John felt a tug at his heart. He had never been the type to ignore someone in need, yet he was also a practical man who had responsibilities. He glanced down at the meat in his hand, thinking of his family waiting at home, but the sight of the woman and child, struggling quietly and without complaint, stirred something deep within him. He could not simply walk away. He stepped closer, trying to be casual so as not to embarrass her. He watched her hands, the way they fumbled with coins, the way her fingers trembled with exhaustion. She had worked hard to gather the vegetables, clearly planning to feed her child and herself with whatever she could manage. The small amount she lacked seemed trivial to John, yet it was everything to her. He realized that a few coins could make a world of difference to this small family. A difference that might change their day, maybe even their week. For a moment, he hesitated. Should he intervene? Should he let her manage on her own? He had never met her before, yet he felt a strange connection, a human bond that did not need words. He watched as she counted her money again, frustration and worry crossing her face. The child clung to her side, looking up at her with trust and hope. John could not ignore it any longer. He approached the vendor and quietly asked the price of the basket. The vendor replied, and John realized that the amount the woman lacked was small, easily covered. He reached into his pocket and took out the coins, holding them in his hand. He looked at the woman and child again, and a warm feeling spread through him. It was a feeling he had not expected to encounter that morning. A sense of purpose and connection. John walked toward the woman, trying to appear casual. "Excuse me," he said softly, making sure the vendor heard but keeping his voice gentle. "I can cover the rest of the amount for you." The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she could not speak. The child looked up at John with a mixture of curiosity and hope. She shook her head slightly, as if refusing, but John simply smiled and held out the coins. "Please, it's not much. Take it," he said. She hesitated, clearly moved by the gesture. Her hands trembled as she accepted the coins, and tears welled up in her eyes. She whispered a quiet, "Thank you," her voice thick with emotion. The child clung to her even tighter, sensing the change in their circumstances. John nodded, feeling a warmth in his heart that he could not describe. It was a simple act, yet it felt monumental in that moment. As she picked up her basket and adjusted it on her arm, John felt a sense of calm and satisfaction. He had come to the market for meat, for a routine errand, and yet he had found something far more meaningful. He had witnessed struggle, and he had had the chance to help. The market, which had seemed ordinary and routine just moments ago, now felt alive in a new way. Every sound, every movement, every glance seemed to carry more weight, more significance. John paid for his meat, carefully placing the coins in the vendor's hand. He smiled, exchanged a few friendly words, and turned to leave. But his mind was still on the woman and child. He wondered what their day would be like now, how this small act of kindness might ease their burden. He realized that life often presented choices in small, quiet ways, and the decision to act with compassion was sometimes more important than anything else. As he walked away from the market, meat in hand, he felt a mixture of relief and joy. Relief that he had done something meaningful, and joy from the knowledge that he had helped someone in need. The sun had risen higher now, casting a warm light on the streets, and John felt a sense of connection to the town, to the people around him, and to the world in general. The day had begun like any other, but it had already taught him a lesson, that sometimes the smallest gestures could carry the greatest weight, and that kindness could transform not only the lives of others but also the life of the giver. After leaving the meat stall, John felt a quiet sense of satisfaction in his chest. Yet, as he walked through the crowded market, his eyes kept returning to the widowed Apache woman and her small child. They were just a few steps away, trying to make their way through the throng of shoppers. John noticed how carefully she maneuvered the basket, adjusting the weight with each step. Her face was calm, almost stoic, but her eyes revealed the worry she carried every day, the worry of surviving, of feeding her child, of making sure that the next day would not be any harder than the last. The child clung tightly to her side, moving in rhythm with her steps. Every now and then, he glanced around, curious about the bustling market, yet clearly aware of the tension in his mother's movements. John slowed his pace, trying not to draw attention, but he found himself walking alongside them without even realizing it. Something about the way the woman carried herself, the mix of strength and vulnerability, stirred a deep feeling in him. As he observed her, he noticed that she stopped in front of a small stall selling bread. She picked up a loaf carefully, weighing it in her hands. She hesitated, then set it back down. John could see the silent calculation she made in her mind, figuring out what she could afford and what she could not. The child tugged at her skirt again, pointing toward the bread, and she bent down to whisper something to him. John could not hear the words, but he could see the gentle way she reassured the child, trying to make him understand that things would be okay. John's thoughts began to churn. He had come to the market with a simple goal: to buy meat for his family. But now, he felt a pull toward this woman and child, a sense that they were somehow a part of his morning journey, even if he did not know them. He thought about the struggles they might face every day, the difficulty of surviving on limited means, the constant worry about providing food and shelter, and the loneliness that comes with loss. He realized that helping her was not just about money. It was about giving a small measure of hope, a reminder that kindness still existed in the world. He stopped a few steps behind them, trying to figure out the best way to help without embarrassing her. He didn't want to make her feel ashamed or indebted. He simply wanted to ease her burden, even if just a little. He glanced around the market, noticing other shoppers. Some looked at the woman briefly. Some ignored her entirely, lost in their own errands and distractions. John felt a mixture of frustration and compassion. It was strange to him how people could be so busy and yet so unaware of the struggles around them. The woman moved on from the bread stall and approached a vendor selling vegetables. She picked up a few fresh items: tomatoes, a small bundle of carrots, some leafy greens. She counted her money, only to find she was a few coins short. The vendor shook his head politely, his expression kind but firm. She hesitated, looking down at the coins in her hand. The child tugged at her skirt, looking up at her with a questioning expression. Sensing her worry, John's heart tightened. He realized that this was the moment of choice. He could walk away, finish his shopping, and return to his family, as he had planned. Or he could act, offering help to a woman and child who clearly needed it. He thought about his own life, his family, his home, the comfort and stability he often took for granted. Yet, he understood that this comfort came with a responsibility. If he had the means to help, why should he not do so? John stepped closer to the vendor, pretending to examine the vegetables casually. He watched the woman fumble with her coins, trying to make up the amount. She counted them again, her hands shaking slightly. The child clutched her side, eyes wide and hopeful. John felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of purpose and clarity. He knew what he had to do. He leaned slightly toward the vendor and whispered quietly, ensuring that the woman could not hear. "Can you please hold the basket for a moment?" he asked. The vendor nodded, understanding immediately. John then reached into his pocket and counted the coins he had. He had already paid for his own meat, but he had enough to cover the remaining amount for her vegetables. It was not a large sum, but he knew it would make a world of difference to her. Taking a deep breath, John turned toward the woman and smiled gently. "Excuse me," he said softly. "I noticed you need a little help with your basket. I can cover the rest for you." "If you like." The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes widened, and she took a small step back. She shook her head slightly, almost refusing, as if she did not believe someone would help her. The child looked up at John with curious eyes, sensing the shift in the situation. John smiled reassuringly, keeping his voice soft and kind. "Please," he said again. "It's a small amount, and I would be happy to help." Her hands trembled as she accepted his offer. She whispered a quiet, "Thank you," her voice filled with emotion. The child's small hand reached out, touching John's arm briefly in silent gratitude. John felt a deep sense of satisfaction and humility. He had come to the market with one purpose, and now he realized that life often offered moments that were far more important than our own plans. He handed the vendor the coins, ensuring the transaction was complete. The woman carefully picked up her basket, adjusting it on her arm. She looked at John once more, tears welling up in her eyes. She nodded slightly, unable to find words that could express the depth of her gratitude. The child smiled shyly, their small face lighting up in a way that touched John deeply. For a few moments, they stood there, the bustling market continuing around them. But the world seemed quieter, slower, and more meaningful. John realized that small acts of kindness could carry immense weight. He had helped someone in need, and in doing so, he had experienced a sense of fulfillment that went far beyond any material gain. As he watched the woman and child move on, John felt a shift within himself. He understood that life was not just about our own needs and comforts. It was about connection, compassion, and the willingness to act when others needed help. He thought about the lessons his parents had taught him, about the importance of empathy and generosity. Now, standing in the middle of the market, he experienced these lessons in their purest form. John walked slowly toward the exit, meat in hand, reflecting on the encounter. He thought about how easily people could pass by those in need, ignoring their struggles. Yet, he also realized that a single decision to act could ripple outward, creating change that was not always visible but deeply felt. He smiled to himself, knowing that he had made a difference in the lives of this woman and her child, even in a small way. The market around him seemed brighter, filled with life and possibility. He noticed the faces of other shoppers, some smiling, some serious, all busy with their routines. Yet, he felt a sense of connection to them, knowing that the world was full of moments where kindness could be shared. He felt grateful for the opportunity to act, to step outside of his own concerns and help someone else. As John exited the market, he looked back once more. The woman was moving steadily, the child clinging to her side. Both carrying their basket of vegetables, she turned and waved briefly, a small gesture of thanks that made John's heart swell. He waved back, feeling a warmth that stayed with him long after he had left the market. Walking home, John thought about the simple yet profound lessons of the morning. He realized that life often presented opportunities in unexpected ways, and it was our choice to recognize them and act. Helping someone did not require grand gestures or wealth. It only required a willing heart and a sense of empathy. Today, he had learned that even the smallest acts could carry immense meaning, changing not only the lives of those we help, but also our own. The morning had begun like any other, with routine errands and familiar paths. But it had turned into something extraordinary, a reminder of the power of kindness, the importance of awareness, and the beauty of human connection. John felt inspired, moved, and quietly proud, knowing that he had made a small but significant difference in the life of a woman and her child. He walked the final stretch toward his home, the meat in his hand feeling heavier in his grip, not because of its weight, but because it was now accompanied by the weight of meaning, purpose, and the joy of helping. The sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the streets, and John felt a quiet gratitude for the day, for the market, and for the chance encounter that had transformed an ordinary morning into an extraordinary lesson in humanity. John had never felt such a strong mixture of emotions in a single morning. The market had seemed ordinary at first, just a place to buy food, meet vendors, and catch a few familiar faces. Yet now, after helping the widowed Apache woman with her basket, it felt different, alive, with a sense of purpose and meaning that he could not ignore. He walked slowly, still carrying the meat for his family, but his mind was entirely on the woman and her child. He wondered where they would go next, how their day would unfold, and whether this small act of kindness would make even the tiniest difference in their lives. He remembered her eyes, soft, cautious, yet filled with gratitude, and the child's shy smile. A smile that had seemed to say, "Thank you for noticing us." John felt a warmth in his chest that was unlike anything he had experienced before. It was not just satisfaction from doing a good deed. It was a deep, grounding feeling, as if he had connected with something fundamental about being human. He realized that kindness was not only about helping others, it was about understanding them, sharing in their struggles, and offering a piece of hope when it was needed most. As he continued walking through the market, he noticed the people around him in a new light. Some were laughing with friends, others were arguing over prices, and a few were simply walking with their heads down, absorbed in their own worlds. John felt a subtle sadness at the thought that many people went through life oblivious to the needs of others, too focused on themselves to notice small opportunities to make a difference. But he also felt hope, because he knew that a single act, even one as simple as paying for a basket of vegetables, could ripple outward and inspire change. He decided to take a short detour, following the woman and her child at a distance, curious to see how they would manage the rest of their shopping. He did not intend to interfere. He simply wanted to observe, to see the immediate impact of his decision. The woman had regained a small measure of confidence. Her steps were steadier, her movements more assured, as though the weight of the world had lifted slightly from her shoulders. She adjusted the basket on her arm and moved carefully, but with determination, guiding her child through the crowd. The child skipped occasionally, trying to keep pace, and even held out a small hand to touch a nearby stall display. John smiled quietly to himself. It was remarkable how a small gesture of help could transform not only the circumstances of the person receiving it but also their mood, their energy, and their hope for the day. He felt a renewed sense of purpose himself, a clarity that came from witnessing the immediate effect of his generosity. As they approached another vendor selling fruits, the woman hesitated again. She selected a few apples, turning them over in her hands as if trying to calculate the cost mentally. John noticed her hesitation, how carefully she weighed each fruit, considering both quantity and price. She counted the coins in her hand once more, only to find she was slightly short again. This time, she looked around, almost embarrassed, but the child tugged at her skirt, signaling that they needed to continue. John felt a sense of urgency rising within him. It was one thing to help her once. It was another to stand by and see her struggle repeatedly. He approached the vendor quietly, asking the price in a soft voice, careful not to embarrass the woman. The vendor smiled knowingly and nodded. John handed over the coins without hesitation. The woman's eyes widened once again, this time with disbelief and renewed gratitude. She whispered her thanks, her voice trembling, and the child clutched her side even tighter. John felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had helped ease their burden, even if just for a few moments. As they continued through the market, John began to feel a deeper connection with the woman and child. He realized that life was filled with small struggles that often went unnoticed. People carried burdens silently, trying to survive, provide for their families, and maintain dignity despite hardship. By helping her, John had not only offered financial support, but had acknowledged her humanity, her struggle, and her perseverance. That acknowledgement, he understood, could mean as much as the coins themselves. He watched her pause to let the child rest, crouching slightly to adjust the basket and check the items inside. The child's eyes sparkled with curiosity and excitement. Despite the weight of their situation, John felt a surge of empathy, imagining how difficult it must be for the woman to raise a child alone, to face each day with limited resources, and to carry on despite grief and loss. The quiet courage she displayed moved him profoundly. John realized he could not simply walk away yet. There was a pull inside him, a sense that his journey in the market that morning was not yet complete. It was as if the universe had placed him in that exact moment to make a difference, to offer support when it was most needed. He felt a deep responsibility not out of obligation, but out of genuine compassion. He wanted to make sure that she could leave the market with dignity, with enough supplies to feed herself and her child without worry. He decided to act again. John approached the woman with a calm and gentle voice, careful not to startle her. "I can help you with the rest," he said softly, extending his hand toward the basket. She looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise, unsure if she should accept help once more. She hesitated, glancing at the child, then back at John. There was a moment of silence, the bustling market fading into the background as she made her decision. Finally, she nodded slightly, allowing John to assist her. He handed the coins to the vendor and helped adjust the basket. The woman's eyes glistened with tears, and she whispered a heartfelt, "Thank you," once again. The child smiled shyly, their small face lighting up with relief and happiness. John felt a wave of warmth and fulfillment, unlike anything he had experienced before. It was not the money that mattered, it was the act of connecting with another human being, of recognizing their struggle, and offering a hand when they needed it most. For a moment, they stood there together, the noise of the market surrounding them. Yet the world felt strangely still. John realized that helping someone was not just about giving, it was about presence, attention, and understanding. By noticing her, by caring, He had transformed an ordinary morning into something profoundly meaningful. The woman adjusted her basket and nodded at him once more. And John smiled, feeling a bond that transcended words. As they began to move toward the exit of the market, John continued to reflect on what had happened. He thought about how many people go through life ignoring the struggles of those around them, focused only on their own lives and needs. He felt grateful that he had been in the right place at the right time, that he had the chance to act, and that he had not turned away. The satisfaction he felt was not fleeting. It was a lasting sense of purpose and humanity that stayed with him as he walked alongside the woman and child. The market seemed brighter now. The colors more vivid. The sounds more meaningful. Every interaction, every glance, every small gesture seemed amplified, as if life itself had become more alive. John realized that helping someone was not just a matter of money or material support, it was a matter of heart, empathy, and understanding. He had learned a lesson that morning that he would carry with him forever, that even small acts of kindness could create ripples of hope, connection, and change. As the woman and child moved steadily toward the edge of the market, John felt a deep sense of peace. He had acted when it mattered, and in doing so, he had not only helped them, but he had also changed himself. The encounter reminded him of the importance of noticing, of caring, and of being willing to act in moments that might seem small but were in reality profound. He realized that life often presented choices quietly, almost invisibly, and it was up to each person to decide whether to take them. The woman paused once more, turning to give John a small wave. The child mimicked her, waving shyly but with a sparkle of happiness in their eyes. John waved back, feeling the connection in that simple gesture. It was a moment that would stay with him forever. A memory of compassion, courage, and the quiet power of human kindness. As he walked away, meat in hand, John felt a deep sense of fulfillment and clarity. The morning had started as any other, with a simple task and familiar routines. Yet, through his decision to help a struggling widow and her child, it had transformed into a profound experience. One that reminded him of the best aspects of humanity: empathy, generosity, and the courage to act when it matters most. He realized that the market, which had seemed ordinary, was a place where life's most important lessons could unfold. Every person had a story, a struggle, and a need, and sometimes, the smallest acts of attention and support could change the course of their day, or even their life. John knew that he had been part of something important, something meaningful, and that feeling stayed with him as he continued on his way. By the time he left the market entirely, the sun was higher in the sky, bathing the streets in warm, golden light. He felt different not because he had completed his errands, but because he had chosen to connect, to act with compassion, and to offer help when it mattered most. It was a simple choice, yet it had made all the difference. John walked away from the market feeling a sense of quiet triumph and deep reflection. He still held the meat for his family, but it seemed almost secondary now, a reminder that even routine errands could transform into moments of profound meaning. The morning had started like any other, yet in just a few hours, it had turned into a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. He thought about the widowed Apache woman and her child, wondering how the rest of their day would unfold, and hoping that the small help he had given would make their burdens a little lighter. As he walked down the dusty road leading to his home, John felt a strange mix of emotions: happiness, humility, and an overwhelming sense of connection to the world around him. The act of giving, he realized, had created a ripple not just in the lives of the woman and child, but in his own life as well. He reflected on the courage it must have taken for her to navigate the market alone, raising a child with no support, and surviving each day with quiet determination. That courage, he realized, was something extraordinary, something that deserved respect and recognition. The sun climbed higher, warming the earth and casting long shadows along the path. John noticed how the light fell on the walls of the small houses, how the wind rustled the leaves, and how life seemed to pulse gently around him. He thought about his family waiting at home, about the simple pleasures of sharing a meal, and about how fortunate he was to have the means to provide for them. Yet, more than any material comfort, he felt a renewed understanding of what it meant to truly live, to notice, to care, and to act. He imagined the woman walking through the market, her basket now full, the child beside her looking happy and reassured. He pictured her returning to her small home, preparing a simple meal with the ingredients she had bought, and feeling a small but significant relief, knowing that she had enough to get through the day. The thought filled him with warmth, a sense that even the smallest gesture could create meaning that extended far beyond the immediate moment. John realized that life often presented opportunities for kindness in subtle ways. A glance, a word, or a simple action could change someone's day, and sometimes their entire outlook. He thought about the countless people who went unnoticed, whose struggles were invisible to those around them. He felt grateful that he had been in the right place at the right time, that he had recognized a need, and that he had chosen to act. It was a reminder that life was full of choices, and the choices we make, especially those guided by compassion, could define the essence of who we were. As he continued walking, John thought about the lessons he had learned that morning. He realized that helping someone was not always about grand gestures or heroic acts. It was about noticing, understanding, and responding with empathy. It was about offering support without judgment, offering hope without expectation, and connecting with others in moments that might seem small, but were deeply significant. That morning, he had done all of that, and it had changed him in ways he could not fully describe. He reached a small hill overlooking the town, and paused to take in the view. From there, he could see the market where the encounter had taken place, now bustling with life, but already fading from immediate memory. Vendors shouted prices, children ran past, and shoppers haggled over goods, unaware of the quiet story that had just unfolded in their midst. John felt a sense of gratitude for the chance to be part of something so quietly profound, a story that would stay with him for the rest of his life. As he descended the hill, his mind wandered to thoughts of humanity and connection. He realized that the world was full of stories like this. Stories of struggle, resilience, and quiet courage. Many went unnoticed, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to recognize them. By acting with kindness, even in small ways, we could honor those stories and become part of them. He thought about how this realization could influence the way he lived, how he could carry forward the spirit of empathy and generosity in everyday life. John arrived at his home, greeted by the familiar sight of his modest garden and the smell of fresh earth and flowers. His family was inside, preparing for the day, and he felt a rush of love and responsibility. The meat he carried was no longer just a practical purchase. It was a symbol of his ability to provide, not only for his family but, in a small way, for others who needed help. He placed it on the kitchen counter and looked out the window, thinking about the woman and child once more. He realized that while he had helped them that morning, the real lesson was not in the act itself, but in the awareness it had awakened in him. Life was full of moments where we could choose compassion over indifference, connection over isolation, and action over inaction. That morning, he had made those choices, and the experience had transformed his understanding of himself and the world. Later, as he sat with his family sharing breakfast, John felt a quiet peace. The routine of the day continued, but he carried within him a memory that was extraordinary. A memory of noticing someone in need, of stepping forward, and of offering help without expectation. It was a story that would stay with him, a reminder that the simplest actions could carry the deepest meaning. He spoke little of the encounter, knowing that some lessons were best held quietly in the heart, but the feeling of fulfillment and connection remained strong. As the day went on, John thought about how he could continue to live in this way. He realized that kindness was not limited to grand gestures or special occasions. It was something that could be woven into the fabric of everyday life, paying attention to others, offering help when needed, and seeing beyond one's own concerns. He felt inspired to carry this lesson forward, knowing that the impact of small actions could ripple outward in ways he might never see. Yet that mattered all the same. In the evening, John returned to the market briefly, this time with no shopping to do. He walked slowly through the familiar paths, observing the stalls, the vendors, and the people. Everything seemed the same. Yet he noticed subtle differences, the way a vendor smiled at a customer, the way a child reached for a piece of fruit, the quiet interactions that often went unnoticed. He realized that life was full of opportunities for connection and compassion, waiting for someone willing to pay attention. He thought about the Apache woman again, hoping that her day had continued smoothly, that she had returned home safely, and that the small help he had given had made a difference. He imagined her telling the child stories, preparing a meal, and feeling a sense of relief and gratitude. That thought filled him with quiet joy, knowing that even a single action could create a ripple of hope and comfort in another person's life. As night fell, John reflected on the day's events. The sun had set, the market was quiet, and the town had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Yet the memory of the morning remained vivid and alive in his mind. He understood that life's most meaningful moments often occurred unexpectedly, in quiet corners, in small acts that went unnoticed by most. That morning, he had been part of such a moment, and it had left an imprint on his heart and mind that would never fade. John realized that his life, like everyone else's, was full of choices. He could choose to act with compassion, to notice those in need, and to offer help without expectation. He could choose to connect with others, to recognize their struggles, and to share in their humanity. That morning had shown him that these choices, even when small, were powerful, and that they could transform both the giver and the receiver in profound ways. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for his family, for the opportunity to help, and for the reminder that life's simplest actions often carry the greatest meaning. He understood that the market, the woman, the child, and even the simple act of paying for a few coins worth of vegetables had created a story he would carry with him forever. A story of kindness, courage, and human connection. As he prepared for bed that night, John thought about how he could continue to live in this way. He realized that every day would bring moments where he could choose to notice, to care, and to act. He felt determined to carry forward the lesson of the morning, to embrace opportunities for kindness whenever they arose, and to live in a way that honored both his own values and the struggles of those around him. In the quiet of his home, with the day's chores done and his family resting, John felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. He knew that life would continue, with its routines, challenges, and surprises. Yet he also knew that he had experienced something extraordinary that day, a simple act of generosity that had created meaning far beyond what he could measure. It was a reminder that the power to change lives, even in small ways, rested within each person, waiting to be realized. As he drifted to sleep, John's thoughts lingered on the widowed Apache woman and her child. He imagined them safe, nourished, and a little more hopeful than they had been that morning. He felt a profound connection to them, a sense of shared humanity that transcended distance and circumstance. And in that quiet moment, he understood that life's true richness was not found in possessions, wealth, or status, but in the moments when we choose to act with empathy, courage, and compassion. That day, John had gone to the market for meat, but he had walked away with something far greater, a story of kindness, a memory of courage, and a lesson that would guide him for the rest of his life.